Yeah.
Welcome to today's episode of The Irresistible Factor. I have a guest on that I've been talking to for a long time, and I'm really excited for him to share his story with you. This is Andrew Salisbury, who is the founder and CEO of Purity Coffee. Welcome to the podcast, Andrew.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me on.
So great to have you. So this is one of my favorite topics, coffee, because I am it is the one vice I feel like I haven't given up, and you don't consider it a vice, and now I don't either because of all the conversations we've had. So I'm really happy for you to share your story. So why don't you start with just a little bit of background on how you started, what you did before you founded the brand, and then a little bit about Purity.
Sure. Yeah. My background actually, most of my life, I've actually been in software and specifically in software in Latin America. So I started a company in Latin America and sold that. The sort of my background is I really have never came from coffee. I came from technology. And so there was a very different start for me in terms of direction.
That's an unusual story, actually. I've had a lot of people who are investors or people who worked on other brands and then were like had an idea and wanted to start their own. But this is an interesting transition from technology to um, retail. So or you're not really in retail yet, but to a brand that's a CPG brand. So talk about why.
It first started is I sold my company in 2011. It was a software company in Latin America, and my wife and I and a little daughter at the time, 3-year-old, decided we were going to take some time and travel, and so we traveled for over a year, just over a year. And then my wife started having some health issues. So she started having sort of like fatigue and just, difficult to get out of bed in the morning. And she was drinking a lot of coffee. And my background, being English, was a tea drinker. I was never really a big fan of coffee. And so I started doing some basic research about the health benefits of coffee. And there was a real mixed bag. A lot of people were saying,
Mhm.
I want to give up coffee. I need a
Yeah.
resolution. I'm giving up coffee. And there was other people who talked about all the health benefits from the antioxidants in coffee. Anyway, bottom line is my wife said to me, "Look, if I'm going to give up coffee, you need to come with some serious evidence." So I was lucky to get an introduction to two professors at the Institute of Coffee Studies in Vanderbilt. And I met them for dinner, and they just gave me this long shopping list of all the health benefits of coffee. And that's when I had my sort of big aha moment. If this was true, and for a moment, for a little while, I was just thinking like maybe it's not true. Maybe there isn't all these health benefits, and these professors are wrong. But if it's true, how come there is no brand out there that is focused on
Yeah.
making decisions to maximize the health benefits of coffee? And so that was my first start into this.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it, because I do think that people really struggle with coffee I mean, is it a vice? Is it not a vice? Is it good for you? Is it bad for you? And I think I've been on every diet under the sun, and many of them want you to eliminate caffeine. And I think that's really interesting. So talk a little bit about what you discovered, because I think I mean, obviously that's what Purity Coffee is based on. But what kinds of benefits does it offer? And how did you go about making a brand that was actually truly a better coffee?
I think the point you just made is a very important one. A lot of people conflate coffee with caffeine. So
Hmm.
obviously,
Yes.
coffee has caffeine, so does energy drinks. All of these things have caffeine, but do the
Yep.
health benefits come from the caffeine, or is the caffeine just present? And that's the thing that we notice. So the truth is that the health benefits come from the antioxidants in the coffee. So there are things like the polyphenols, like chlorogenic acids, dragonolene, cafestol, caweol, some of the lipids on the coffee. They don't really come from the caffeine. In a few cases, caffeine helps in terms of Parkinson's, dementia, Alzheimer's, that sort of thing. But mainly the benefits that come from coffee come from the antioxidants in the coffee. So that was my first step. My first step when these two professors gave me an education on the health benefits of coffee, they introduced me to Professor Adriana Ferrar, who's one of the leading coffee scientists in the world on the health benefits of coffee out of the University of Brazil in Rio. And so we spent, really effectively 18 months in research and development looking at all the things that mattered, because in no cases was it the caffeine. In no cases was the amount of caffeine in your coffee relevant to the health benefits. apart from the fact that how you would tolerate coffee. So if you're a fast metabolizer of caffeine like I am, which means I could have a double espresso and then go to sleep, then you're not going to have any of those sort of negative side effects. But if you're a slow metabolizer of caffeine, it stays in your system a lot longer and you're going to get some of those side effects. So only to the extent that you want to tolerate the right amount of caffeine in your body, move between decaf or lower caffeinated coffee, but try and get the most antioxidants you possibly can in your body from drinking lots of good quality coffee.
I think that is a thing that people are confused about. I think what you said is true because I just did it and I already know the differences. I know that all caffeine is not created equal. And I also know that all coffee isn't. So talk about your coffee specifically. What did you have to figure out to make the kind of coffee? Because I know your coffee is made in a different way than others and processed differently. And can you talk about all those things so people really understand why purity is different than whatever you can get in the store right now?
I think that's one of the benefits that I had not coming from the coffee industry. I came
Yeah.
with a big question, and that question was, what if you were to make every decision based on health? You didn't compromise for taste, you didn't compromise for cost. What would that look like, and what's the difference that makes the difference, sort of thing? So the first step was very easy selection was avoid the bad stuff. So how do we avoid the bad stuff? There's things like mold, mycotoxins, heavy metal residues, pesticide residues. There's things that you don't want in your coffee, but that's actually very easy to fix. It's fixed by the sourcing and it's fixed by lab testing. You can make sure that your coffee is mycotoxin free. You can make sure your coffee is organic. The real sort of difference, though, comes from the amount of chlorogenic acids, the antioxidants in the coffee. So what we do differently and how we started with a sort of clean sheet of paper is how would we maximize the antioxidants in coffee, both on the sourcing side and also on the roasting side? So, and this is a very deep subject, but I can give you sort of like a mile high
Yeah.
the first thing that we noticed is that we lab tested coffee from around the world, and we were looking for the ones that are highest in antioxidants. And that varied crop to crop and harvest to harvest, and even region to region. But then over time, over a number of years, we started to realize that the labels on the coffee we were buying were all similar. They were organic, regeneratively farmed, Demeter certified, Smithsonian bird certified, hand-picked, hand-selected. And what this told us was that while we cared about those sort of things, it told us that coffee that was processed as close to nature as possible was higher in the positive compounds that we cared about.
Yep.
So that allowed us to sort of shortcut things, and we could say, we're only going to be buying coffee from these sort of farms. And so that was the first thing, buying coffee that was very high in antioxidants. Second thing is that when you roast coffee, you roast away the antioxidants. So a very dark roasted coffee has less antioxidants than a light roasted coffee. But here's the sort of crux of the matter. In the early stage of roasting, you can create acrylamide, which is not good for you. In the late stages of roasting, you can create PAH, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, which come from any burnt food. So there's a sweet spot that you have to develop if you care about the antioxidants. So we work with the University of Brazil. Based on every harvest, we maximize the sweet spot in our coffee. So the level of the antioxidants is important. And then the final sort of message here is that we realized that just buying high quality organic specialty grade coffee wasn't enough. We actually wanted to do things on a farm level. So about a year and a half ago, we invested on our first farm in Colombia, and we've used that as almost like a test farm to experiment on a farm and a soil level about how we can maximize antioxidants in coffee, in the green bean.
Are there other brands doing the same kinds of things that you guys are doing? Because I certainly don't hear too much about what you're talking about from a health, like I've heard on websites and social media from doctors and naturopaths about the benefits of coffee, but I don't think there are too many brands talking about the health benefits.
I don't think there are. I think there's brands that focus on the easy stuff, which is the absence of bad things. And right, how
Mhm.
do we make an organic, or how do we get an
Yep,
organic
yep.
coffee mold-free, that sort of thing. There's no company that I know of that's focusing on the antioxidants in coffee, either from the sourcing or the roasting part, and also not taking the next level. But genuinely, I really hope there's a lot of players in this market, because I think this is going to be a new category. I think
Mhm.
that right now people buy coffee based on taste and convenience and cost. And if they knew about the health benefits of coffee, there would be a fourth reason why they would buy their coffee:
I agree.
health. And so, we're doing this thing naturally every single day, 3, 4 times a day, without fail. It's the supplement you never forget to take. And without focusing on the health benefits, we're missing big opportunities because it's just really random. In other words, if we're not looking at things through, or coffee through, the lens of health, we're not making the decisions that maximize the health benefits.
And for the most part, you would say that brands that are out there right now are not focused on this from a processing or sourcing perspective because it's just not something people are thinking about. So you're generally not getting the health benefits the way that you could because people aren't really thinking about how they're processing.
I think there's two parts to this. I think that consumers, in a lot of cases, those who are health conscious, just want to avoid the bad stuff, and they don't recognize necessarily that
Yeah.
maximizing the good stuff. And the other thing is, it's very complicated. It's very easy to test for mold and mycotoxin. It's a $200 a container test. I think every coffee company should be doing that. I mean, we as consumers should ask our coffee companies, whatever coffee company we use, to make sure that it's mycotoxin free. But
Yeah.
the additional things like maximizing the antioxidants in coffee, that's when it starts to get a little bit more complicated. And I think the risk for a lot of coffee companies is they don't want to educate consumers about the health benefits of coffee, because the next question is going to be, well, so what? If coffee is good for me, what makes the difference? And then the moment they have to say, your coffee needs to be fresh, it needs to be within a few days off the roast of the coffee, it needs to be organic, regeneratively farmed, hand-picked, hand-selected, it needs to be bird-friendly to show that it's grown in its natural habitat. You want to use things like biochar, biodigesters, to make sure that that the farm is sustainable. All of these things add cost and add complexity.
Yeah.
So I think the problem is that the large coffee companies would rather you don't know about the health benefits,
Hmm.
because then they would have to make decisions about the other 99% of coffee they produce that don't follow those sort of levels and standards.
Interesting. That's so interesting. You said something really interesting that I want to point out because this is kind of cool. You talked about supplements and then you talked about coffee and you said coffee was a supplement we never forget. And I think that's really cool, but you don't think of it that way. But if
Yeah.
you did, I mean, I feel really good about coffee because I love it and I also have it in the back of my head now that it's good for me. But I think people don't necessarily make those associations, and that's kind of a cool thing. But that does cause you to need to educate, which is a whole other, right, stream of communication that needs to happen. So there's a lot to it. So I guess my next question for you will be, what have the biggest challenges been for you, um, trying to get people to understand what you're talking about? Because it is complex and it is hard to know, are there mycotoxins in the coffee I'm drinking? I honestly don't know the
Yeah.
answer to that.
Um, I'd say the biggest challenge is it's very hard to sort of decide. It's like a Jenga tower. Like if you pull away one sort of little tile, does it collapse the whole tower? There's mistakes that I would say that we would that we would probably do differently, but there was mistakes that led to different decisions. So, for
Yep.
example, I would say that we over-engineered what our customers were looking for at the time that we launched. So, in other words, our customers were looking for, let's say, mycotoxin mold-free organic coffee, and a lot of people stopped just there. We went a lot further and started to look at the antioxidants in the coffee, and that opened up a level of complexity that our customers weren't necessarily willing to pay for.
Yep.
But the good news is they started to recognize the difference in the way they felt. So, I mean, I think, that's where the whole sort of Jenga tower comes in. The truth is that people who drink our coffee feel better and they feel differently. And that's something which is very difficult to take away. I mean,
Why
that's
do they feel, can you talk about why they feel different?
well, the absence of bad stuff and the presence of good stuff. The absence of bad stuff is that a lot of people, and more people, are becoming intolerant to pesticide residue, heavy
Mhm.
metal, mycotoxins, mold toxicity, that sort of thing. So a lot of people have been told to give up coffee when the reality is they should just give up drinking bad coffee, or
Yeah.
it's not, for health. And then the good stuff comes from the anti-inflammatory aspects of coffee. So the number one antioxidant in the American diet is coffee. And it's not just because our diet is bad, it's because you do it every single day and it has more antioxidants than kale and blueberries and
Wow.
the things that we think are high in antioxidants, because people just don't, they almost consider coffee as the guilty pleasure. And it's not. It really can be just incredibly good for you. 6 forms of cancer, prevention of type 2 diabetes, heart disease, number one, sort of anti-inflammatory in the American diet. I mean, it's just, it really should be looked at with this new lens.
So you started out with a coffee product that was probably overkill as far as the kinds of things that consumers were looking for. They didn't really understand, they didn't go as far as you did, right? Which I don't know. I don't think that's a bad thing because you have things to talk about that no one else can, right? And then they started to believe because they started to feel better
Yeah.
drinking it. How do you get that message out to more people? And then where do you feel like the hurdles from a price perspective are? Are they big? Like, is there a giant difference in price? And does that make you have a consumer base that's way smaller? Or do you think with more education, it won't matter?
Yeah, I think the one of the issues is that in order for this model to work as well as it's working, people need to understand that it's not food. All food is not created equal. It's like salmon. Is it farm raised or is it wild salmon? Is it is it industrial sort of beef, or is it farm raised? All of these things make a difference. So in order for you to have good coffee for health, it means that the farmer has to take a higher level of risk. And what I mean by that is organic coffee, which is specialty grade, which is a very high grade of coffee, is more difficult and is more risky for farmers to produce because pesticides make it safer. I mean, the
Mhm.
fact that if you have a pest infestation and it could wipe out your whole harvest, if
Yep.
you're limited to organic, then it's a higher level of risk for you and your family. So
Mhm.
we're asking farmers to take on a higher level of risk, add more complexity and that sort of thing, but the end result will be a better quality coffee for health. And I would say that ultimately, the thing that I care the most about is, over now 7 years, we have 41,000 testimonials with an average star rating of 4.9. And I say that because that's validation that people feel differently. If
Yeah.
ultimately, when the rubber meets the road, consumers don't notice a difference, yeah, it's like fish oil that you go, okay, this fish oil is good. Is it better for me or worse for me? You just trust the brand. That's not true with coffee. You will feel a difference, a noticeable difference in the way you perform and the way that you feel after switching to a good coffee.
So now at this moment in time, you're on Amazon and your own website, right? So it's all DTC. Tell me a little bit about that. What's the plan? How have you grown? I mean, you just mentioned something to me, which I think you should mention about being the number one brand of organic coffee on Amazon. I think that's an incredible statistic. And then how did you get there?
Um, our sort of perspective is this: that we felt from the beginning that one of the problems, and you sort of highlighted this, is education. We want
Mhm.
people to understand that not all coffee is created equal and all the things that we do. And we felt like direct to consumer on our website allowed us to give information. So when we moved to Amazon, we realized there would be less information that we could give our consumer because we would just be limited to that. So but that hasn't slowed us down. So that's moved very quickly. So that sort of gives us an indication that our consumers are ready to make this more accessible.
Definitely. Definitely.
Um, so what existed maybe 7 years ago, because I always felt like if you walk by our bag of coffee on a shelf at Whole Foods or whatever, and we were more expensive, you wouldn't necessarily understand what the justification.
Right.
But as
Right.
we built our brand, as we built, I mean, we built the success of the company over time, the testimonials over time. I think now people are recognizing what the difference is. So we've built up a really interesting market, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And what percentage of your business is Amazon versus your own website?
It's about 15% is Amazon.
Oh, wow, so that's awesome. I
Yeah.
mean, it's awesome that the majority of it is on your own platform.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
really cool. Do you migrate subscribers generally speaking, or do people stay in one platform? Like if they start on Amazon, do they stay there, or do they eventually just migrate to you guys
It's
directly?
very hard to track because Amazon, that's one of the problems that we've got with
Hmm.
Amazon. We don't necessarily have insights directly to our customer. We'd like to
Right.
respond. We'd like to sort of make sure that those customers are happy. But there's a bit of a Chinese wall between the two.
Yes.
So I'm
Yeah.
sure there's a migration back and forth, but our attitude is this. We just want to make it easy for the customer to buy.
Yep. Yep.
So however that looks, and there's advantages and disadvantages of both. The advantage of Amazon is if just in time you need some coffee, you'll get it there the next day. So
Yes.
we lose the contacts.
Sometimes the same day, I will
Yeah,
say, which I think is a miracle.
yeah.
How much of the, like, are you getting good information from the customers that you already have on your site? Like, do you get to talk to them more often and understand what they like and don't like? And um, did that lead you to, like, do you have a lot of subscriptions? I would imagine you do.
Yeah, just under 30,000 subscribers, and
Wow.
and the community is very active. I mean, we're talking all the time. We just did a 5,000 person survey with our customers. We're really trying to understand what our customers value. Balance was a new coffee that came out as a result of what the customers were saying, which is a third caffeinated coffee. So we basically created a lower caffeine, but not a decaf coffee,
Oh, that's
based
interesting.
on customers saying they wanted to modulate the way they felt during the day so that they could start off with, let's say, flow, and then they could have a balance, and then they can later on the day have a decaf. And that's a way of sort of modulating the caffeine part while maximizing the amount of coffee they drink.
That's amazing. Um, when did you know you had something, like you were really onto something that you could turn into kind of your legacy, the thing that, you live on?
I mean, it took a long time. It took a long time, partly because my experience, my background hasn't been in coffee. And so this
Yeah.
was like drinking from a fire hose. It was very
Hmm.
complex. And, we were often doing things that were very different than the way that the coffee industry would normally develop. I think our first big indicator was when we got to the Inc. 5000. We were 193 in Inc. 5000 of the fastest growth private companies in the US. So I think that was number one or number two in food and beverage. But what's really been interesting is over the last 4 years, we just found out again this year we were in Inc. 5000. So it's the consistency.
Great.
No other coffee company today has been featured 4 times or more in Inc. 5000. So I mean, in terms of the fastest growth US based coffee company tracked over 4 years, we can show the fastest growth, consistent growth over the last 4 years, since no coffee company has even featured four times. So that
That's
to me is
awesome.
huge
Yeah.
validation.
Yeah, for sure. Um, have you raised capital before now?
We haven't. It was a very small friends and family, a couple of people that we wanted to bring into the picture in the early days. We're just about to go for the first time to a crowdfunding platform with Start Engine, and that's basically it's really more the reason we didn't go to outside capital is we could afford to make the initial investments and build this company in the way that we wanted. We wanted to make sure that we could act inside the integrity of the company, meaning like we knew that some
Mhm.
directions feel like a heavy lift to venture capital or private equity, and we didn't want to miss alignment. We wanted
Yep,
people, that's the one, and it's completely understandable. But if you have a fund that lasts 5 years, you're looking to exit within 5 years, venture capital is going to push you towards that exit.
that's
What
right.
we really want to do is build a business to last, build a business in what we believe is a new category of coffee. So the alignment was incredibly important. We never found the right alignment, but now with crowdfunding, it allows us to find that exact alignment because our customers become our investors.
That's a really interesting strategy. And I haven't heard anybody talk about that at scale. I mean, I've heard people do crowdfunding to get a brand off the ground when it was just an idea, but talk about that. How
Mhm.
much money are you trying to raise through crowdfunding? And do you have indications that you'll be able to get there?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're raising a small amount just to test. I mean, 1.2
Okay.
is the original round or the first round that we're going to go to. Um, you know, odds are that's going to be subscribe to very, very quickly, because at 1.2, that's about 1,000 investors. I mean,
Mhm.
each of probably close to 3 million between our mailing lists and affiliates and that sort of thing. So I actually think that it's going to be a pretty quick exercise, but I also want to experiment to see about the alignment, how well it works. And
Yeah.
if this is a strategy, either we're going to carry on growing organically, which is fine. I mean, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel there. We will continue to grow, and we're growing on average about 90% a year for the last 7 years.
Yeah.
Continue to grow, but crowdfunding could allow us to wrap in our existing customers, get them excited about the direction we're going on, and allow us to go into new markets that we're just not in presently. So it's a real, opportunity, I think, for
Yeah,
us.
it sounds like it. Talk about where you want to be. So you said new markets. What does that mean?
Well, I think there's two parts to the business. The one part of the business is fulfillment and like how we provide a great quality product over time. The other part of the business is what we can do on the farm level to start improving coffee for health. And so a lot of our effort is going to be on the supply side. So while at the same time we want to make sure that the coffee is available and growing and we're getting a wider footprint, one of the big sort of impending sort of black swans that's happening in the coffee industry is the World Health Organization predicts there's going to be 50% less Arabica coffee by 2050. So because of climate change and because of the seasonality and the problems with frost and insect damage and that sort of thing, there's going to be less coffee, but more people chasing a higher quality coffee. So what we really want to do is improve coffee on the farm level so we can
Mhm.
start to sort of like grow coffee in a way that's not only good for health, but good for the environment.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds really important. That sounds scary to coffee drinkers, right?
Sorry.
It's kind of scary to coffee drinkers to hear that kind of statistic about how much less coffee there's going to be, because you could imagine what that means, right? Higher
Yeah.
prices, less availability. So interesting to think about.
Yeah. And the quality of coffee for health. I mean, I think that's one of the, as people are starting to recognize that this is something they should really pay attention to, the fact that that would go down in quality over time is a little bit scary. So, and I think
Definitely.
we need to start making moves now.
And talk about, we've talked a little bit about the fact that right now you're DTC only. What about retail? What's your plan there?
I think it's the same thing as investors for us. It's about alignment. It's about the idea that we want to make we want to make it easier for our customers, but at the same time, we want to align with retail that understands food as medicine, that really just sort of like promotes, what we're trying to do. Because what we're trying to do is create almost like a new distinct category of coffee, and so we want to align with those sort of grocery stores and outlets that are focused on that not all products are created equal. We can actually improve the
Mhm.
benefits of that product and make it easy for our consumer to buy.
So you're talking about something that I think is really important and interesting, and we don't often talk a lot about on this podcast, because mostly brands are at the early stage and they don't completely know what it means to have this kind of alignment. So you're talking about alignment with investors, which I've talked about with everybody. That's really important, right? If you get the wrong investor, the
Oh yeah.
stories are endless about how bad it is and how horrible the experience becomes and how people generally wind up abandoning their own brands because of that situation. But you're not only talking about that, you're talking about values alignments, right? So you have this idea that coffee is for health, and every single decision that you're making, whether it be who you go to for investment, what kind of retailers you go to, what kind of farms you um, collaborate with, all of your decisions, I would imagine how you brand the product, how you talk about it, are made in the context of something that's so specific. Has that made the decisions, I'm not saying easier from a financial perspective, but has it made it easier to say yes or no to certain things?
Absolutely. It's made the decision simpler, if not easier. Simpler in the sense that it's pretty clear what our North Star is and how we have to
Yeah.
operate. And so there's not much disagreement about what is the right move when you want to improve coffee for health. The
Yep.
question is, will people pay for it? Is now the timing right? Can we afford to make this investment in the farms? These sort of things. So a lot of that is just, but the decision itself is pretty clear.
That's pretty awesome. I'm actually interestingly working on a branding class for an accelerator program that I'm working with. And I'm in this section right now where I'm thinking about values and alignment and how you make all the decisions, like what the brand stands for and who the target audience is. And um, you know, what the right retailers are. And I think all the things that you just talked about make that feel easier or simpler, as you said, because sometimes there are no options. There are places where you absolutely can't be. There are products that you will never make, no matter what, right? That's really cool.
And I think it helps to that there's less force for you to be distracted. We don't decide that we want to go into tea or Kahlua
Exactly.
or
Yeah.
or we're going to sell sugar or whatever. I mean, it's not about money. It's about how do we expand the message of coffee and health to a wider audience, and how do we improve the product that we sell to that audience.
That's amazing. Um, have you learned any like big lessons that you feel like you think about now as you make decisions?
Um, I probably would have spent, but again, this is the whole Jenga tower. I probably would have spent more time talking to our customers about what they were looking for now, but it might have led me to decisions that wouldn't have been long term as part
Yeah.
of the decisions we made. There's certain things that I feel like are incredibly valuable. I mean, one is, you know, 41,000 testimonials. I've read every single one of them. Every night I read everybody's testimonial without fail,
Wow.
you know, and I
Wow.
have done since the beginning of the business. That's where the rubber meets the road, where the customer is telling you, this is my experience. That is the great headlight into me understanding, okay, we need to improve our fulfillment, or we need to improve this certain area, or people are not understanding this factor of the business. And I just feel like that's one thing that's very strong, is really listening to the voice of the customer.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And when you think about going to retail and reaching an audience that hasn't found you because they were specifically looking for you, do you think that it'll be more challenging on that frontier, or do you have a way that you think you can go about it that'll make it easier?
I think it will be more challenging, truthfully. I think, but I think I think our timing is good. I think
Hmm.
we've, you know, as you talked about, a lot of brands, and they start off and they're waiting for their first grocery store and signs of life and how much they can sell in the grocery store. We've managed to put off that decision for a long while, and in the same time, we've built up a really loyal fan base of
Yeah.
customers. So I feel like it's translatable now. So I mean, you know, I think it'll be more difficult because there'll be some people who just don't understand the brand and understand the story. But I think the fact that the website has so much information on the site, and the testimonials will all add to that.
Um, I've been talking to you for a while, so I know I've never had this experience with you, but have you ever had a day where you were like, oh, no more, no more of this. This is too much, it's too hard. Have you had those?
Lots and lots of days like that. I tell you honestly, this is the one thing I do when I have bad days is I read testimonials. It's like,
Mm.
it sounds funny, but it really does
No,
give.
it's amazing. If you have good ones, I'm sure that it's really inspiring.
Oh yeah, and just try it for random on any one day. Try today or try tomorrow, yesterday, whatever. It's incredible because it gives you the sort of like the sign of life that you're going, okay, this is worthwhile and it's worth doing. So it's, you know,
Yeah.
remote.
Yes. That's amazing. And it's cool that you have them because a lot of brands don't get that right up at the beginning or I mean, it's not that early on for you. You've been doing it for a little while, but
Yeah.
it's good to have them. I was talking to a vet yesterday that launched a line of DTC, not DTC, over the counter products for like you could go in CVS and buy something for your dog to help them with their digestive issues until you could get to a vet. And it was developed by a vet. And he said a similar thing, although he doesn't have those testimonials yet, but he's got I make dogs feel better and I know I can see the relief in the face, he sees the testimonials in real life. And I think that's a really cool thing to keep you going, just knowing that you're doing something that's making people feel better, be
Yeah.
excited. Yeah, that's really cool that you have that.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's very motivating.
Uh-huh. What would you say to founders who are struggling or don't see a clear path, or I mean, you know how it is, you've done it. Sometimes it's really hard.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that if there's any advice I would take is like making sure the business is meaningful to you. In other words, is it fixing a problem that you think that you can fix? Is the problem large enough that it will be meaningful for you to fix that problem, because that's the thing I think that creates extra motivation. As you look at the problem, you look at the people who are showing the signs of life that you're fixing that problem, or you're adjusting and going in that direction. I think that's what gives you well, at least with me, it gives me a motivation to carry on going and sort of like build this, is because you know that the problem is worthwhile, it's meaningful, and there's signs of life that it's improving. And I would think being really in touch with your why, what you're really doing this for, what problem are you trying to solve, and why is it important, is the thing that gives you the motivation, to go forward.
Also the confidence that you have something, right? Like I think when people, I mean, there are a lot of, I'll take beverage or energy bars as an example. There's so many. And unless you have a meaningful problem to solve, it's like really climbing a very steep mountain, and you may or may not get there. Probably, maybe not. But I think if you have a good enough why and you're solving something that's real and big enough, I think that's compelling. But I do think a lot of people couldn't even answer those questions, and that's tough,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, being really attached to the why. And why are you doing this? Because I mean, there will be times when you're just not going to see the results, or you're not going to see. It's easy to fixate on things that are not working, and unfortunately, as entrepreneurs, that's what our job is. It's constantly to look at where's the gap, and and to sort of like focus. My wife and I do this often. We at the end of every day we do the gap and the gain, and the idea is, I think Dan Sullivan worked on this, is the idea that you look backwards at where you've come, you don't look forwards to what's missing. So
Yeah.
an idea that just taking a little bit of practice and go, wow, today was good because I moved forward in this way or this way. Because as entrepreneurs, I think we often think of, what's missing, and you don't sort of pat yourself on the back enough. And, there are big wins, and it's so easy to move past those big wins and just focus on what's missing. So
Yeah, that's really good advice. Um, Before you started this brand, were you looking for a brand to start, or literally was it just a thing that happened because you were having a conversation and you were like, wait a second.
no, I mean, not at all. It's like I really wasn't thinking of starting a brand, because it would go against every bit of advice I'd ever heard, which
Yeah,
is
yeah.
on the
Yep.
success of one business into another business and think that it's both going to be the same. And it couldn't have been diametrically opposite. I mean, I was selling call center equipment in Latin America, software.
Wow.
It was $1 million sale, would take 18 months or so to close on average. I mean, very sophisticated sales process, to selling bags of coffee. I mean, it was very much drinking from a fire hose and learning about a completely new industry. And, in some ways, there was some advantages to that, but there was a lot of disadvantages to that.
Yeah.
So I wasn't thinking of setting up a brand. In fact, I consciously thought about different plateaus and different stages, where I thought I would just take this business to the first plateau. I would prove that we can do something that would impact the health benefits of coffee. Then I wanted to prove that people would buy coffee and they would refer their friends. And then I would pass it on to a third party who could do an amazing job at this, and then I kept sort of finding different
That's
plateaus,
awesome.
levels, and eventually I just said, okay, I'm in this for the long haul.
That's cool. That's great. I also think that's pretty unusual. Um, well, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I want to make sure that you've said all the things that you want to say. Is there anything else that you feel like you want to share about your journey, about the brand, about the future?
I would just say that probably the most important thing is that coffee, like most other foods, is farmed in lots of different ways. And that if we pay attention to the way that our coffee is farmed and the way it's processed, and it's something that we do every single day, it will have a meaningful impact. Just like if you focus on eggs, or you focus on bread because you eat those every single day, that's going to have a real impact. The same thing with coffee. I feel like that there's a big gap between the way farmers are compensated and how much we're willing to pay for a cup of coffee, when we're out and about, and getting a regular cup of coffee. And I think it's important that we start moving up that scale for the farmers, so they make more money for doing a really good job, because the level of complexity in their business and the level of risk is huge. And I
Huge.
think we need to reward those people who are doing a really good job.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you want to just say your what the website is so people can go and check you out? I think it's important.
Sure. Puritycoffee.com, and I would encourage everybody to just at random read some testimonials. I mean, it's just like, honestly, it would be very inspiring, but just at random, pick the testimonials for today or last week or last year. It'll be a great, validation.
Amazing. Awesome. That's so good. Thank you.